For anyone researching families in the UK, especially England, Wales and Scotland, the 1921 census is a key piece of record and archiving for your family. Now, the 1921 census has just been released on Ancestry. It's been available for some time on Find My Past. And what I wanted to do in this video is show you some of the things that are very important to know about the 1921 census. And in fact, the 1921 census for England will be the last census we'll probably see for many years. The 1931 census was burned in a fire, and there was no census in 1941. Now, this census came after the First World War, when almost 1 million British servicemen died, and then right after the First World War was the Spanish flu. So this is the new modern Britain taking place, and we'll take a look at some of the things we need to be aware of within the census. So here is a census of one of my family members. And the first thing we need to do is, when we look at a census, is we need to realize there's two sides to it. There's the front and the back. And on the back there's instructions and some detail about how to fill in the census. So let's take a quick look at this census form here, and let's look at the top heading. So one of the key things to remember is, in fact, despite it saying that the census would take place on the 24th of April 1921, the census didn't actually take place until the 19th of June. And this was because we're in the middle of a lot of industrial action. The general strike, I think, was in 1926. So a lot of industrial action, and they couldn't take the census when they wanted, so it was postponed to 19th of June. Now, this is very important when you're looking at people's ages. So the ages will not correspond to the 24th of April. So that's very important to know. The second thing to know is that, as we can see here, if we go back to the back page here, is that the censuses, especially in Ancestry and Find My Past, there's a census for England, there's a census for Scotland, one for Wales. There was no census for Ireland because there was the Irish War of Independence was ongoing, so there was no census for Ireland at this stage, and one for the Channel Islands and one for the Isle of Man. So we can see that there's 4 different censuses we can get hold of within Ancestry and Find My Past. And the census for Scotland is actually available in Scotland's People, and I'll put a link to Scotland's People below in the notes. So we'll look mostly looking at the English census. Most of the censuses are very similar, but there are some small things that are different, so we'll take those into account later on. Now, as we can see in the census itself, is that this will go back again to the front page here. Every person who is alive at midnight, and as we say on the 19th of June. So it didn't matter where you lived, it mattered where you were. So at this time, because it's the 19th of June, some families may have been on vacation, may have been at guest houses, may have been at hotels. So they will be looked at where they were, and they could be at families. So if you're trying to find your family in their normal location, and they're not there for whatever reason, you will have to look outside. Maybe it was taking vacation, maybe there's a hotel, maybe that was friends or family's house. So that's important to bear in mind, the location of the census itself. The other thing to bear in mind is, if we had a military person in the census, and we can look at the military census here. So let's take a look at the army census type. And what I've done here is I've come to the 1921 English census when I do a search for the card catalogue. So I've gone straight to the census rather than going through a person. And I've just typed in army here. And now we can see all the different districts for the army here. Hong Kong, China, India, India again. So we can see all these different places. And if we have people at a particular place, we can then go and look in those particular census. So this is a different way of looking at things. I'm just going to click through the census. So census 1921, schedule NM, this is for the military. And it's always very important to look at the first part of the census, this descriptive information here, all the different notices. So this is Victoria Barracks, Cork 2nd Battalion, the Hampshire Regiment. And we can go in In fact, find some completed pages here. And here we have the information specifically on all officers and other ranks. And we can see that there's different information here, the name, the age, sex, whether single, vast majority here on this page is single, whether British private, where they were, and we can click through this because we have ranks on here. And in fact, we can see there's some people that may well be married here in different ranks. So if you think your family member was in the military, we can go directly to the military and look at the NM census. Very different, very informative, and we can take this different approach if we choose the army, as I say, the army here, and then we can look at the different enumeration districts here. So that's another types of census. Now, looking at different people, as we say, it's depended where we were at that particular census time. If people were on board a ship, no matter whether English, British, Welsh, or any other nationality, if they were on board a ship in an English port, then they would be part of an English census. So we'll see from the schedules of those particular districts that have a port, when they're looking at the ship, we can have all kinds of nationality there. So again, if you're researching somebody who might have been a foreigner as far as the British were concerned, on a ship in England at a port, say like Liverpool, they would have been part of the 1921 census. Let's go back to the main census, the personal census. We can look at two things here. This is the head of household, the signature of the head of household. I declare that this schedule is correctly filled up to the best of my knowledge and belief. So this is where the census was signed by your relative. But here on the back page, let's go over here, it says name of person responsible for making the return. And this is filled by the enumerator. And here we have the address, 12 Lambert Street. Interesting here, we'll talk about transcription quality a little bit later on, but you can see the enumerators said Mrs. Dixon, D-I-C-K-S-O-N. Well, when we look at the actual census itself, it's D-I-X-O-N. So immediately there's a difference between the enumerator and the person filling in the census. Another thing to look at is if I'm looking at a particular street, these are often transcribed in order. So I see this is 12 Lambert Street. If I go back, and I'm on Ancestry now, but same thing happens in Find My Past. I'm still on Lambert Street and I'm moving to 1 Ferndale, and I can move down the street quite often. I can move down the street just by moving the census and going along the screen. So now I'm at number 2 Ferndale, which will have been a street off of Lambert Street in Hull. So let's go back to the main census we were looking at. So the address is here. And remember, as far as answers are concerned, we go right to look at the back page, not left. It can be pretty confusing because whichever way I go, I can find a Lambert Street. But this giveaway here is the name of the person responsible for completing the form. So that was Mrs. Dixon, as we can see on this form. Now, one thing, it seems like a modern thing, but one thing they did allow within the 1921 census was privacy. So for whatever reason, if you didn't want to be part of the main census return, main schedule for that location or that house, you can request your own schedule. And in fact, we can see this in the notes here. A person who has applied in the prescribed manner to make a separate confidential return, blah, blah, blah. So you can do your own confidential return here. So this is why it's very important to read the back notes of any of these census, not just the 1921, but any document that you're using. It's important to read the notice. So within the census, it may well be that the person you're looking for has filled in a private census, and it will be slightly different information maybe than you're seeing on the main schedule. Now, we talked earlier that there were different censuses. There was one for England, one for Wales, one for Scotland. Now, in the Wales census and the Isle of Man census, there was a question about languages, which is fairly interesting. If we go over here, this is the Welsh census. I'll go back here, but this is the Welsh census. We can see it looks very very similar to the English census, but here, right at the right-hand side is, can you speak English, Welsh, or both? So we'll see that on the Welsh and the Isle of Man for Manx, which was a language then. So I think maybe this is the only time in the census records we see where they've asked a different question, such as regarding language. And we can see the rest of the tabulation is very much the same as the English census. Now we talked about transcription quality, and this looks like something that looked fairly easy to transcribe. But let's go back to my original census and we can see why anybody making transcriptions will have problems. Now, for us genealogists and family historians, transcriptions are always a big issue, and nothing is ever transcribed correctly as far as I can see. But the 1921 census of England and Wales has its own quirks. First of all, everybody completed their own schedule, so you've got a vast array of different writing types. Some people's literature may have not been that good, so the writing style might have not been as clear. Different kinds of cursive. So we need to find some sympathy for the people who are trying to transcribe this. Also, the 1921 census was very complicated, and it could be filled in a different way. The instructions weren't clear. And I'm just going to use this census that I have on the screen here as an example. This is my own family. And we can see online the column B here. It's this one's fairly clear what should be written here, but it says head and then the written husband here. So that shouldn't be there. That could be mistaken for the name. This could be mistaken for Charles Dixon husband as a name. The second one, Selina Dixon, the written wife here. Now it looks like an enumerator has gone back in and written wife here in red. And then there's a missing entry here. In fact, for whatever reason, they put two people on one entry. Now, this Arthur Dixon was the illegitimate son of Dorothy Dixon and should really be in his own line, and it should say grandson. That would be the relationship to the head. But it's here. Now, when we look at the transcription, this line 4 has been transcribed as one person, Grace Arthur Dixon. So, again, you can see some sympathy for filling in. Now, as we go over here, you can see a lot of crossings out and scratching out. Again, very, very difficult to transcribe. So we have to be sympathetic. I know it's very frustrating, but we have to be sympathetic to the people who actually tried to transcribe these. They've done a pretty good job, but there's a long way to go and a lot of mistakes. Now, the final thing we may want to notice here is these numbers, 565/6, 459/6, 900, 385, 468. Now, these are very important. These are occupation and employment codes. And we can look those up, and I've put the links to the codes in the description and comments below so you can go to them. But let me flick over to the codes here, and I'll go to the codes on Find My Past. So, and these are available to non-members of Find. You'd have to subscribe to Find My Past to find these. So you can see the different codes. There's an awful lot of them. So if we remember, well, if I flick back here, it was 565/6. Well, the /6 means employed, not working at home. And well, let's go down to 565. Here, 565 bricklayer. So let's go here, bricklayer. And so that's correct. And then bottle filler and domestic servant. So we can look at these, and this is so they could do statistics from the census. Obviously, somebody might put bricklayer as one word, bricklayer as two words. So they're really now putting it down into a clear and concise way. And then the different kind of industry. So it could be a bricklayer in home building. It could be a bricklayer working in a different kind of factory. So we'll see from the occupation codes and the employer codes exactly where they work. So that's something to take into account. Now, I hope you found this quick overview of the 1921 census helpful. It's a wonderful tool for us genealogists looking at the UK, especially England, Wales, Scotland, and some of the islands. It's important to remember that this is a very complicated census. But there's 10 things to take into account from this video. Number one, the census date was the 19th of June. The coverage of the census schedules, there's a different schedule for England, there's a different schedule for Wales, there's a different schedule for Scotland. So you need to bear that in mind when you're searching the different censuses on Found Pastoral Ancestry. The census implied the location that you and your family were at on the 19th of June. It didn't matter where you lived, it depended where you were. And some families could be absolutely anywhere. We saw there's a different type of census for the military, and you can see those schedules. You can either find those by date or looking by name, or you can go into the enumeration districts through the CAD catalogue on Ancestry. That also included ships at port or things like that. You didn't have to be English or Welsh to be in a census. If you was in a scheduled location, you would have been enumerated like everybody else. Now we're taking into account completed by the person. You can look on the back of the actual schedule and see who completed it, and then the person on the front of the schedule signed it. So the person who authorized it, if you like, and it could be two different people. And remember, again, on the back is the address. People could have their own private schedule if they're worried about some information that they didn't want to be put out into the larger schedule for that type of environment that they're in. There's language questions for Wales and Isles of Man. We all know the transcription quality could be improved, but we can understand why transcription is an issue with so many different handwriting styles and such a, I would say, complex census. And then we can look at the different kind of codes, employment codes and occupation codes, to come with a true understanding of what our ancestors did. Now, as I said earlier, this is the last census we'll see for England for quite some time. The 1931 census was lost in the fire, and there was no 1941 census. There was, in fact, a 1939 schedule of people, which is available right now, but that's not truly a census. Now, if you enjoyed this video, please take the time to like and subscribe to the channel. It really does help a small genealogy channel like mine. And good luck with the census. If you've got any questions, please pop them in the comments below. Have great luck. Speak to you all soon.